California in 1991. Weezer did not quite exist yet when this photo was taken, but if you can see the intensity in his forehead, he was planning, plotting, scheming. And then there was this band, Rivers' center in the Russian hat, playing in a Christian rock band for his friend Kevin, who's on the right there. Short-lived band, but they had the best bass player in town. That photo was taken at the Whiskey A Go-Go. Here's Pat Wilson and Matt in 1992, February. This is right around the time Weezer was conceived. Style was different then. A lot different. Here's an early shot of Weezer at an in-store. Not even their in-store, they were just hanging out. They couldn't get in-stores back then. Basically, they could just walk into other bands' in-stores and watch. Now, here's a shot of Matt and Pat with pillows stuffed in their clothes, dressed up as obese gentlemen dancing for another band called the Dum Dums. Times were hard back then. You had to take whatever gig you could get. Here's an early publicity shot for Weezer. Woo! Very serious guys with much longer hair. Now, Brian used to be in a band called Carnival Art before he got into Weezer. That's him, second from left. As you can see, Brian hasn't changed at all in 21 years. He looks exactly the same. This is because Brian takes a special potion that keeps him very, very young, always. Now, early on, we lived in an apartment on Stoner Avenue. It lived up to its name. Now, this house is in another neighborhood nearby. This is the Amherst house. The Amherst house is where the band really got together and started rehearsing a lot. They had a small one-car garage that was later immortalized in River Song, In the Garage. It's also where we returned a few years later to shoot the Say It Ain't So video in the rehearsal garage. So when you enter the house, you see this living room with a disgusting couch, but you keep going straight, and you enter the kitchen, and you take a right, and that's an equally nasty kitchen. But straight ahead is a small door, and then you get to the garage, and you can see the telltale, awful, smelly old carpets all over the place, stapled up to keep it, quiet on the outside. But that stayed that way for about 10 years after we moved out of there. So it was anybody who wanted to go there for a carpet, souvenir could go cut a piece off the wall, take it home. Early on, we played places like Club Dump, which was an absolute dump, but it was our dump, so we liked it. In later years, Johnny Depp bought it and turned it into the Viper Room, so that celebrities could, take ecstasy and accidentally die. But early on, it was a much cooler place before it got all dolled up. Oh, I hit the wrong button. Oh, there it is. There's an early set list from 1993. This set list strongly resembles what's about to go down tonight. Not exactly, but pretty close. And yes, they did cover the Beatles' If I Fell for a few short weeks in 1993. It was pretty cool. Now, the first review of the band to ever see print was in 92, and it was not so nice. Let's zoom in. Another band that was trying far too hard to prove something or other was Weezer. This band is probably the most blatant Nirvana wannabe that I've seen yet. And while a slower song at the front end of their set had its moments, the remaining tunes left much to be desired. He was probably right. But you know, what the hell did he want? It was free. A lot of shows back then were free because how else could you get anybody to show up? Nobody knew about the band at all. Here's another free one. Now that's quite a lineup right there. There's some cool bands back then. Where are they now, however? Moving on. Here we are in the studio in fall '93, recording the Blue album. This is an Electric Lady Studios that Jimi Hendrix designed and built in the late '60s.
Oh, Jimmy!
Here's another shot. Rivers on a B3 organ, I believe. That was for the intro to Holiday, I think. Now here's Rick Ocasek, lead singer of the Cars and producer of the Blue and Green albums, and pretty much the nicest guy in rock and roll. And a very, very talented producer. Big props to Rick. Now, during the Blue album, Brian joined the band, and he had to send us a demo tape to prove he could sing. So there it is. 9/14/93. Hi, Weezer. Please enjoy this fine recording. Compliments of Radio Shack and Brian Bell. I hope to see you in New York soon. Thank you, Brian. And Brian sang very well, although he didn't know the words to our songs. And Rivers heard it and said, "He's in. Fly him out here right now. We have to finish this album." And this photo is Brian right after he got to New York. He is stoked. Here's some master tapes from the making of the Blue album. Say It Ain't So on that reel. 2 versions of Buddy Holly. And the B-side, Michael and Karl, is on this reel, although they later re-recorded it for the B-side. That version there didn't make it. There's 2 versions of No One Else and Say It Ain't. Apparently that didn't fit, so they crossed it out. After the Blue album, we had to rehearse and go on tour. And here you see our Bacchus drum head. Pat Wilson invented this strange, vile alien, and it ended up on our drum head and inside the Blue album. That's the same drum head that was in the Blue album. Now we have a fake one up on stage because, as you can see, this one got kind of destroyed. But the thing about it was that Pat was actually trying to draw Popeye. True story. All right, so they had to come up with an album cover. Here's a shot that clearly didn't make it. It includes sitting on a toilet. You just can't do that on an album cover. Well, you can, but you can't do it on a Weezer album cover. Then we got a little bit closer here, but Matt flashed some gang signs, and you can't have that on a Weezer album cover either. So finally, Rivers, oh yeah, here we are, coming up with a logo, and trying to sketch out what it's going to look like. Finally, Rivers hands me a little piece of paper, says, "Just make it look like this." And that was the plan from that point on. So we sketched a little bit better, figured it out, took a test shot, got pretty close, and then we went to Peter Gowland, who was an amazing photographer back in the 60s. He was still kicking it, and we needed that old 60s look. And there it is. However, about 10 minutes after the album came out, a bunch of people said, "You're just copying the Feelies," which is on the left there. And we had never heard of the Feelies, actually. In reality, we were trying to copy the Beach Boys, which is the little cassette in the center there. That was the real ripoff. But everybody said, "Oh, you're copying the Feelies." Well, the Feelies are pretty cool, but we never heard of them. Then we had to get a van to go on tour. We found this amazing looking van out in the suburbs of LA. It was $5,000, and we got it from a guy who looked identical to Muammar Gaddafi. It was really strange, but his name was Carlos, so we knew it wasn't really him. And that's a hell of a van. We called it the Enforcer. And we pictured ourselves tooling around like the A-Team in it, but many, many mechanical failures caused us to rename it Betsy. There we are in Betsy, wishing we had gotten a different van. And here's Rivers loading the gear. Back in the day, there was no crew whatsoever, so we just loaded the gear. And then we got a bus and went on tour with Live. Remember Live? Pretty nice guys. Spin Magazine gave us a Polaroid camera and said, take photos, we'll put them in our magazine. We took about 1,000 and they used 2 and they were about the size of a stamp. So I figured we have to dust these photos off and show them to somebody after all these years. So those are some of the pictures on tour. I don't know who Brian was with there, that's pretty cool. And then the camera broke, so we had to draw on the images. Here we are with our fan club girls. Yeah, Michael and Carly Allen, the greatest 2 girls we ever knew. Sadly, we lost them in '97 in a car accident. They ran our fan club for many years. Very cool people. We love them very much to this day. We dedicate the Memories Tour to them. There's the logo for our first website, the Rebel Weezer Alliance. Here's the coolest poster ever. And now we are back to the Blue album. Thank you very much, New Zealand. Here we go.